grew demand on the e-commerce side to the point that we ran out of product because we couldn't make it fast enough. We really believed that in order to work well together as a team, we all needed to be in person. And the reality is we were wrong. The second largest manufacturer of ribbons in the United States hired us to build an e-commerce site for them.
So, Lori, you started at NASA controlling equipment on the space shuttle, right?
Yes.
And at NASA, you met your husband, who's now also your CTO.
Yeah.
You guys met and you went off to build an e-commerce agency. That was about 27 years ago. And you've now also bought a company that makes flatbread from Norway and sells it in Minnesota. So you guys have, so combined, you guys have made the Inc. 5000 twice, and you've helped your clients grow their revenue by $1.2 billion. That's insane.
Yeah.
And so, congrats. And so, Lori, take us back to when you first, with your first agency, and you were like, shoot, this is a real business. I got to put in systems. I gotta hire people. I got to put in technology. Like, what was that moment like for you that you were like, this is really going to work. This is a real business?
Well, let me tell you. When I started Brilliance Business Solutions, it was in 1998. Amazon was still selling books. So I have a technical background. I went to school in computer electrical engineering and knew businesses that needed help getting online and thought I can do that, right? Like most entrepreneurs think there's a problem out there I can solve. And the reality is I had a business, but I wasn't paying myself. My husband, at the time, he was working at Rockwell Automation, and so his job was paying the bills. And yet we were seeing some really great success. We had the second largest manufacturer of ribbons in the United States hired us to build an e-commerce site for them. They had clients like Victoria's Secret and Coach handbags were their customers, and they wanted to sell to smaller shops online. And so they found us through an article I had written on how to accept credit cards online, although that sounds super common now, like 27 years ago, wasn't very common. And so so we got hired through reading that content. It was really a great project from my perspective. They interviewed 100 companies. They picked us probably because I underbid it. So we were having some good like sales success. And yet also I wasn't making it. I had hired some employees, but I wasn't making enough money to pay myself. And like, I knew there was something here, like that we had something valuable and I couldn't figure out how to grow it. My husband ran into a business coach at an event who offered a free consultation. And I thought it sounded like a scam, but he was like, why don't you just check it out? And so I went and told them my story, and they turned to me and they said, is this a hobby or a business? Because it sounds an awful lot like a hobby, which I was super offended by. I felt like, I'm pouring my life into this thing, and I can't make any money at it. And like, this is really when they asked me what I want. And I was like, well, I want to be able to pay myself. I want to be able for my husband to leave his job and come work with me. I want to, at the time I was working out of my home, which I am now also, but at the time I was working on my home in 1998, I wanted to be able to move into office space. Those were my goals. Office space, my husband leave his job and work with me. I want to be able to pay myself. And they said, well, what would have to be true in order for that to happen? And I was like, well, I'd have to raise my prices. No one would ever pay it. And they asked me, is that a fact or a belief? And they were right. I mean, it was a belief on my part. And that's really like reframing my mindset around what I wanted, what was possible. And to your point, like systems and processes, that's the conversation that really started us defining a path of what we were going to do differently. I raised my prices. We didn't lose the customers I thought we would lose. They stuck with us. My husband left his job and joined me, which was a super scary choice. It was kind of like a burn the ships moment. We're going to do this. We moved out into office space. And I also meant that I needed to change like my role in the business from trying to do all the things to be more focused. Like that was part of my husband coming on board, was him taking over some of the technical work that I had been doing and me being able to focus more at that time on sales until we hired a salesperson. So yeah, that was that moment for me.
And what was the biggest difference when you had that aha moment where you're like, this is not a hobby anymore, it's a business?
Hmm.
Um, what were the biggest, just so you had to raise your prices. But what was it about your business before that made that business coach think it was a hobby?
Well, it was the fact that it was acceptable to me to not pay myself. Like that was a choice that I hadn't attempted to figure that out. So, and which was really interesting to think about my approach to business. I was doing it because it was something I love, which I think is true for many entrepreneurs. I think they love what they do. And I think depending on how they get into business or how it's funded, there may be different approaches to how people think about like making money. But what I really had to get good at was understanding my numbers, like how we generated profit, what we were worth, how we created value for people. And those are all things that started to change once I really decided that it wasn't good enough just to have some sales and hire some people, but actually it had to pay for my house. So which had to be true, right?
Yeah, so then the shift from the moment you're like, shoot, this is a real business, you had to bake into the model that you're going to pay yourself,
Right. Yes.
and then also know your numbers.
Right. Well, right. You have to know your numbers. And in a services business, it's all about like billable hours. And then also when you're hiring people, you have to be able to figure out the challenging part of growth in a services business is that you have to be able to predict the future in order to know what people you're going to bring on board and that you can continue to afford them. And so there are many skills I had to learn over time in that.
And so, tell me about your ability to predict the future.
Yeah.
I imagine, I imagine you're talking about hiring, right? In
Yes.
terms of
Right.
what's your
Yeah.
demand, and then what's your ability to fill that demand. Like, what
Right.
would that look like?
Hiring, like how we determine when we would hire. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So over time, like, well, now what it looks like, now what it looks like is that we have a billable hours forecast that it has projected hours and possible hours and compares it to our resources. And we know when it's looking like we're going to need to hire someone. Back then, we didn't have all those systems in place. And so that's been an interesting process in terms of how we've gone from back then it was we made some of our best guesses and could just kind of figured it out along the way is the reality. I mean, we made plenty of mistakes.
For sure,
And
for
usually
sure.
when mistakes happen, it ends up that owners are working extra, like working hours that aren't getting paid for. Yeah, you're figuring it out as you go.
How'd you end up on the billable hours model? Because I've always I think it's a super contentious topic where some people prefer doing billable hours and some people prefer billing by project. How'd you decide that?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Actually, in the beginning, we fixed bid most of our stuff because we thought that's uh, what we needed to do in order to give our customers reassurance that we knew what we were doing. Um, and we will fix bid some things now too, but what also we tend to work on really complex data integrations and projects. And the reality is once we got better at knowing our numbers, we realized that it was a great deal for our customers, but we were also losing money, which coming back to the fact that we need to be able to pay ourselves, like not, you got to be careful about what things you commit to as a business. And so that's been a part, like we did a fair amount of profit margin analysis and realized that there are certain things that we can fix bid and quote as a project if we've done it enough times that we can say we know what this takes. There are other things that have a part of the complexity involved is the customer themselves. So we used to have an on time and on budget guarantee that we'll still do in certain instances, but the reality is the most common reason that we wouldn't be able to fulfill on it is our customer not carrying out their portion of what we needed. It's really hard to tell a customer that that like they're the failure point.
Yeah.
And so like we're kind of setting so over time what we learned to do was say we know the projects we're involved in are complex. We're going to work to keep the project to be as cost efficient and valuable as possible, and we're going to charge on a time and materials basis because um, we want to be transparent with you about how much time it's taking and how we get it done as quickly as possible. So yeah, it is contentious, but and it's a really interesting time right now because with AI and all the things that are happening in tech, like is billable hours the right metric anymore? I don't know, because now it's changing in a whole different way than than it did
Yeah.
in the past. So
I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that it depends on maybe projects or retainer are better for more productized services where the line between what you do and what you don't do is a lot firmer.
right,
Versus like in your case, you do very complex, very custom builds for e-commerce.
right,
Um, and so in that case, like you're kind of hourly makes sense because if you scope the project and then there's a lot of scope creep, like people keep asking for more and more and more,
right,
then it eats into your margins. But
right,
hourly allows for that
exactly.
custom ability, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. And we do so over time we develop something called success plans. So those are like fixed retainers, but also really fixed hours from our point, and we're helping customers to prioritize the work that's going to be most valuable to them. So there are ways that we can make it so that it fits a certain budget for customers, but we also have to like protect ourselves in that process too.
Makes sense. Makes
Which is
sense.
good. Like one of the things I'm a big believer in, one of our values is trust through healthy conflict. And so that's something that I think is also very appropriate with customers. So the more that we can just say out loud, we all this needs to be win-win for all of us. We all need to make money in it, and you want us to be successful too. And that means you're going to hold us accountable to making you successful enough that this is a good deal for you. Yeah.
Yeah, healthy conflict is interesting. Um, because I feel like before I used to be so anti-conflict, right? Which is
Me
just
too.
another way of saying that like you're just not honest.
Right. Right. Right.
And so I like that. That must be hard to train. Like how do you look for people who already can do that? Do you train it? Like how do you do that?
Yeah, it is really hard. So actually, it's something we repeat frequently. It's like we have a weekly. So we use the EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. But we inserted it into our L10 meetings. It's on our agenda. It's the second thing we do after our personal business best. We remind everyone in the room that we're working to create a safe space where we can all disagree with each other in a respectful way, because we know that helps us to make better decisions as a team. And then we also try and like look for places where there's disagreement and be appreciative or thankful for it. Like to say, I know that probably was really hard to disagree with me on that, or to say thank you. Sometimes I don't do a great job. Sometimes you don't really want to hear that someone doesn't think your great idea was that great. But it is super valuable to have someone recognize your blind spots on your team, and also really dangerous to have a team that won't tell you when they see danger
So
coming.
dangerous.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously NASA has had their moments, where they had issues with not having reporting systems that would voice disagreement. Um, I think it can be a leadership flaw in any organization. And yeah.
How do you thankful for disagreement is fascinating. Um, is that like are there ways that you do that other than just thanking someone every time that they disagree? And I imagine there's a specific way to do a healthy disagreement versus an unhealthy disagreement.
Yeah, there's a book called Crucial Conversations, really good at like talking about one of my favorite. I just gave it to my two adult and almost adult sons. Uh, there are really, and actually we read that book as a team. So that's some of what we do is like we read and talk about healthy conflict as a team frequently. I will share examples of, and my husband and I work together, so we have to be good at healthy conflict, in a way that doesn't make folks uncomfortable in working together. Our leadership team will practice at it. And the interesting thing is, as we bought another company that already existed, going into an environment where there wasn't healthy conflict in the past, where um, that just wasn't a part of how they operated. It wasn't seen as appropriate to voice conflict necessarily. So coming into an environment that didn't have that, that takes time to be able to help folks feel safe and to understand that it's doing me a favor. That like I won't know if they don't tell me. So
And how'd you fix that? And where this is coming from is a lot of hiring conversations with folks who
yeah,
will hire someone who say yes, they agree to
right.
everything,
Yeah,
right? And you can't agree to everything. You clearly don't understand it, that kind of stuff.
right.
Um, and so like how did you inject healthy conflict, healthy disagreement into this? You just bought a Norwegian flatbread company, right?
Right. Yes, the left's the company.
Tell me
Yes.
about that.
Yeah. Um, well, I would say, I mean, so it is something that I talk about. Like when I went in, I told the team, like, I'm a believer in healthy conflict. And I talked about what that means. That means that if we're all in a room and I say something and everyone's agreeing with me, something's wrong. Like that's what, and I told some people, hey, if you want to, if you disagree with me, here's what you could say. You could say, I've got some healthy conflict for you, Lori, and I'll laugh. We'll both laugh, and then you can tell me what you have to say. So I try and give them examples of what it might sound like, but to be honest, that isn't enough, because the reality is that it's a behavior change that's really hard for people, and there are some people that it'll be much easier for than others. And so then when you see the opposite of it show up, so like the opposite of healthy conflict would be like gossip, or like everybody's or a problem like gets really big before anybody shares it, and then there's some drama around it. And so like then you address the issue, and then you can come back and be like, hey, what would have been really great is if we, like, here's what we could have done differently here. Like if I had known earlier, you know. Or honestly, there are moments I fall on the sword, in the sense of like, there have been times, most often where healthy conflict shows up is, or lack of healthy conflict is, that I have made some bad decisions that I didn't realize were bad, because I just didn't know. And so then I can say, hey, team, I would have loved it if somebody had told me that there were some problems with my plan a little earlier. That could have saved us all some trouble here. So and then we learn over time. It takes
Interesting.
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have so many questions. So there's kind of want to define things a little bit.
Sure.
So like if you have, I imagine there's healthy conflict, I imagine there's unhealthy conflict, and
Yes.
then gossip is probably this other category, or is gossip the same as unhealthy conflict?
I would, maybe it's a different category. I mean, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's a concept called triangling. I'm trying to remember this, where instead of going directly to the person you have an issue with, you tell somebody else, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like you're pulling someone else into this issue. Um, and I mean, yeah, that's unhealthy conflict, which is similar to, so that's the other thing. Is like if I have some, and with my husband and I, this is very common when we both, because originally I started the business and then he came into the business and we had employees, and it was not uncommon that someone would have an issue with something he was doing and they would come to me, and or vice versa. They have an issue with something I'm doing, they go to him. And so and that happens naturally because we're married, but it happens in other work environments too. We've all experienced that. And what's really important, if we're paying attention to healthy conflict, is to direct them back, to be like, well, actually, like, I'll hear you, but you need to go talk to the person that you actually have the issue with. Like, I'm not going to work it for you. And so it's an important thing to be able to identify and direct folks back to. And to allow, a lot of times we don't like being uncomfortable, which is a part of gossip too. We don't like the discomfort of like directly addressing our issue with someone. And so we have to learn how to be able to do that.
And so is triangling gossip? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's similar. Yes, it is similar. I mean, gossip
Okay.
can become something different, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if we define gossip as going to someone else to
Right.
complain about Lori,
Right,
right?
right, right. Sure. Yes.
Um, but so then what about when I go to you and I have conflict, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. That
Um,
can be, there are two ways to do it, healthy or unhealthy. Yeah, right. Yes.
what are some examples of doing it unhealthy and doing
Sure.
it healthy?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, a healthy way would be, well, let me start with healthy. A healthy way would be like, Lori, I know you and I both want the best thing for the business. And like, here's what we have in common, and here's what you've been doing, but I think you're off track. Like, I don't think that's the right way to do it, and it's showing up here. Here's the problem it's causing. Here's what I see. Like, help me understand. That would be that would be great. That's a really great conversation to have. Or you have these plans. I think they're unrealistic. I don't think we're going to be able to hit them. I know your intentions are good. I don't think we can do it. That would be super healthy. Um, an unhealthy way would be coming and like disparaging me, like taking personal attacks at me for how I approached it, right? Or more often an unhealthy attack doesn't even come directly to me. But unhealthy would be, you know, uh, and I've experienced this less directly and more seeing it in with other members of my team, where folks might be swearing at each other or saying, assuming the worst of assuming that someone wasn't working for a positive outcome. That's unhealthy conflict.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Um, and then last question. I have so many questions on this. Because it's pretty common with teams in terms of especially when you hire in Latin America versus the Philippines versus like different countries
Sure,
where
absolutely.
conflict isn't common, you know? And
Yeah.
how do you take someone who doesn't do any conflict, healthy or unhealthy, and help them do healthy conflict?
Honestly, I'm continually trying to get better at this. I think it can
Yeah.
be a challenge if someone's not used to it, especially when there's power dynamics at play. So it is hard for me as a CEO if I hire someone who is anxious about impressing me to feel comfortable disagreeing with me. So I'll try and find examples. I'll try. So like as an example, if like like with developers on my team, it is not uncommon that or let me give you a very specific example. At Norza and Lefsa, I had an idea that I thought was a great idea. It was that we were going to allow, because people order this Norwegian flatbread from us, and they like to order it for a special occasion. And so we said, well, what if we could allow people to pick a future delivery date for a product, and when they order, and then we can get their order in advance. Sounds great. And so we went and built this functionality. It was really cool. Customers loved it. It ended up being a problem in the sense that we didn't have systems set up to fulfill. It created just this mess of like orders coming in with future delivery dates that we had no way to manage, and it was overwhelming for the team, and we had to shut it off. Now, the good news is we had pre-built into the plans a way to shut it off, and we knew we were testing something, so that's all good. But like what might have been even better is if someone had said to me, like, Lori, are you sure this is the problem we should be solving? Like if someone had asked, or if someone had said, hey, if we get these orders in, we don't actually have a good way to manage it. If someone had raised those things earlier. And so those are just examples to continue to point out to people. And to offer them permission to do it. And some people are just always going to be a little less likely to do it than others. And so then you look for folks that are willing, and you use that as an example of how it helped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it. So you think it's less trainable? You have to look for it?
I haven't figured out how to train for it well. So, yeah. Or, I mean, the ways we have trained for it have been more like reading books together. Um, yeah, I know Crucial Conversations has a training for it, but I do think there are some aspects of it that seem to be cultural, that I don't know how to train for. So if you've got a way you've seen it work, I'd love to learn from others too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Because we do a lot of our hires in Latin America.
Yeah.
Um, and in Latin America, um, culturally, it's more of an optimistic culture, right? And
Right.
so, which means, I don't, the difference is in more Asian cultures, they're more anti-conflict. In Latin American cultures, um, it's not that they're anti-conflict, it's that they're trained to like not see the problem as much, see more of the opportunity than the problem, right?
Right.
And so the reason that's an interesting distinction is because for us, we were able to train problem solving. Um,
Okay.
and we saw improvements that way. And so like um, in one culture, whatever, East Asian culture in this case, it's the anti-conflict framing in
Right.
which I don't know how to train that. We haven't cracked that one. But in Latin
Right.
America, I think we've cracked, not perfectly, but
Yeah.
we've cracked to a degree how to train the ability to see problems and
Mm-hmm.
communicate problems. And because they're not conflict averse, it works out.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, the other thing we've done, like with our development team, and we do now have folks, even though we used to all be in person together, we're all working from home. We've got folks in multiple states and places. And, but we do have EOS and use L10 meetings, and we use the issue discuss solve framework frequently together throughout all of our teams to like work various issues together. So that gives the team practice to work conflict related, like not necessarily like interpersonal conflict, but like conflict related to a specific issue, like different approaches to solve something, gives them practice at doing that.
Yep. Yeah. And we are on an EOS Lite, and for listeners, EOS is a one of a few operating systems, probably the most popular operating system for
Mm.
entrepreneurs. Um, and this is a specific type of leadership meeting where everything's focused around the issue or the problem.
Right.
And so we actually, it's a great framework, and we
It is
actually
a
use
great
that.
framework. Yeah.
Yeah, we use that as part of as one part of training on in terms of communicating how to go about problems. So that's been great. Um, okay, and then so then in because you started originally you started culturally everyone's in office, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And today you're sitting in front of your library and
Right. At home. Yep.
right,
Right.
dialing in. And so
Yeah.
what was that shift like?
Well, yeah, it was very well, it was COVID, I mean, was what forced the shift.
Uh,
Um and it was, I mean, it was um we really believed that in order to work well together as a team, we all needed to be in person. We thought that that was a really important part of what made us different. And the reality is we were wrong. I mean, that was an assumption that we had made that um I don't know. Like certainly, like even to the point where we hired overseas contractors to support us on a project. We flew them in to work with us for a few weeks in person, just so
yeah.
they would really understand how we worked together. And so the interesting part of that, like, and also related to the healthy conflict piece that we were talking about, is that we had to learn when kind of overnight we all had to start working from home. We had to take these assumptions we had around like why we needed to be in person together and figure out how we were going to do those things remotely. together. And so like, how do we, in order to be effective at healthy conflict, one of the things you have to have is trust. You have to know that if someone has to know that if they disagree with me, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, screw that. They can no longer be on the team. We don't. And so, like, how do you develop that kind of trust when you're not in person together? Took us time to figure out how to do that, but it's been a real positive, because it's enabled as a part of our growth is to be able to hire people from other states, from Puerto Rico. We've had some folks in the Czech Republic that have done work with us for long periods of time. We actually had an employee during COVID that started traveling the world and then since they did that, other employees on our team have also chosen to do that. And really, there's no reason that can't work. You just have to figure out how to manage around it, which also means for a small growing company like us, it's a way to attract people who are looking for a more flexible work environment, and keep some great people.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
does that, now that you've opened up remote, um, does that change how you hire too? Like, are you now hiring more internationally than you did before too? Or is it more US folks that you kind of let travel the world more?
It's more US folks that we let travel the world more, but we wouldn't be against hiring internationally. We'd even looked at it. It's more like systems, really payroll, like all the administration of international that we didn't want to mess with. But yeah, yeah. So, and the last few years have been like the reality is that because we primarily serve manufacturers, 2025 was not a big hiring year for us in the sense of a lot of our customers were dealing with tariffs and were pulling back their spend. So that's a whole
Yeah,
different thing to have to work through is like you're a services business and you've been, building towards the scale that then really quickly changes. So,
right, right.
yeah, but yes, to come back to your question, it has opened up that we could certainly be hiring more internationally. And also it gives us the flexibility to be able to let people travel the world if they want. So,
And especially because now you have, post COVID, you've started to develop the remote skill, right,
right.
essentially.
Yeah.
Um, because you said in order to have healthy conflict, you need trust, and you're trying to build trust remotely. Did that work? How did it go for you guys?
We're still figuring it out. Like I wish, so we did, in an ideal world, we would have budgets to be able to pull people together in person, like multiple times a year. For a few years, we did an all team gathering in Milwaukee on an annual basis and brought everybody in for it. For a 3 day, and it was really good. Like I still really value those times in person together. Last year budget was tight, and so we didn't do our all team gathering. We still do have like volunteer times. So a lot of our team is still around Milwaukee. So will do like a half day service project once a quarter. And for folks who aren't local, we encourage them to get out and do their own. So anyway, the bottom line is we've worked, Angela Steinkamp on my team originally was hired as, like someone to do a invoicing, and like she has grown into our people ops manager. And so her job is all around thinking about culture and how we build culture as a team, even though has become how we build culture as a team, even though we're remote. And like we've played with things like trivia games remotely and all sorts of like what can we do? And so yeah, we have breakout rooms where we do small talk, very scripted. Here's 3 questions you need to answer with your group. All is a matter of how we build trust together as a team. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Um, and so so you want to build trust and then grow the culture. Um, what is your culture? Like, are you able that's hard to define. Like, are you able to
Yeah,
define
no,
that?
well, let's see how I do. I mean, we have 6 values. One of them is that we believe in trust through healthy conflict. That's one of our points of
Right.
culture. We hire for it. We talk about it, and we send out little guidebooks on here's what our we are learners. We are accountable. We are wholehearted, which means that we're more than the work that we do, but we're our entire whole people. We're responsive and Shoot, I think I forgot one. I'll come back to it later. Maybe it's
No
just
worries,
five.
no worries.
Anyway, no, but so we've got our values, and those are things that we talk about frequently in terms of like how we hire, how we manage. Um, we use those in our performance reviews, and we use them in our interview process. We send out an overview to them before our interview and ask folks to like think about it coming into the interview and talk with us about how they live those out or which things are their favorite from the list. So yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
And um, okay, and so now super curious, because you are currently living the dream of many folks listening to this right now, um, which is myself included, um, which is a lot of people may run agencies, and they're like, hey, if I know how to build systems for folks, I know how to drive leads for folks, I understand how the internet works.
yeah,
Um, and you do it for an industry. In your case, you did it for manufacturing. Hey, if I know how to do this, shouldn't I just buy the business and then scale it, right? And if people have this opinion, myself included, that that's kind of like playing it on easy mode because your competitors don't know how to do the things you know how to do.
sure, sure, yeah.
How true is that? Shatter the myth.
Um, well, it hasn't been as it has been an amazing learning experience. I've learned a lot it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. I wouldn't say it's easy mode. Um, it's taught me us a ton that we've gotten better at Brilliance about what it's really like to be a manufacturer that is growing and scaling. We bought a business that was around 1 million in revenue, doing the majority of their business online via Amazon. And our business is e-commerce. And so we said, let's come in and we can help grow their direct to consumer e-commerce. We can help them, to your point, scale and grow, like through what we know how to do with processes. The reality is there's just a ton when you're coming into an existing business, like they have their own culture, they have their own way of working. They have the Amazon business, the reality wasn't a super profitable side of the business. So there were just a lot of things that had to be adjusted and changed. And that all just takes a lot of time. And in our first year, we did really great at the stuff we know how to do. We grew demand on the e-commerce side to the point that we ran out of product because we couldn't make it fast enough. Which like maybe you say is a good problem, but it's not a good problem. The team was super
Yeah.
stressed. People were calling in and being like, "What do you mean I can't get my left side? I always get it this time of year." And so that meant the next year we were spending on production improvements, which is not really my sweet spot, but I've got a great team that knows how to do that there. A great general manager at Norsland, Zach Lind, who's worked a lot in the food space. But so then we really improved our capacity, and now our challenge is that we don't have enough demand for all the capacity we have. Also, because the business used to only make lefse on certain months of
Yeah.
the year. Because it's very seasonal, and we're trying to build a business that keeps people employed year round. And that was never the expectation in the past. People used to expect only to work a few months of the year. And so now the problem we're solving for is that we need to be creating enough year round consistency to keep people employed in the way that they need, in the way that we want to be able to scale and grow that business. So yeah,
Yeah. So I'm super curious what surprised you coming from the agency world to the manufacturing world, even though you've been servicing manufacturing,
yeah,
because it sounds like what you're really good at is driving demand, right?
yes, right, right, right. Yeah,
And so what I've heard, tell me if this is wrong, is agency agency growth you kind of expect like this, whereas
right, yeah,
ecom, right?
right.
Ecom, maybe manufacturing is more like this, scaled, right?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes. Yeah. I've been working with the Food Finance Institute. I was working with the coach and I said, I'm going to get this business to be profitable every month of the year. And she was like, no, you're not. You shouldn't be
Damn
trying.
business.
That's not a food business. A food business isn't profitable every month of the year. And I was like, oh, thought that's what I was trying to do. So it's like, okay, well, some of my assumptions about how things worked were wrong.
So what were the biggest assumptions? I imagine That's one is the
Yeah,
supply chain constriction. My other
right.
guess, tell me if I'm wrong, is so it's you bought a business doing 1 million in revenue. I'm assuming at that size, it's probably more volatile than if you bought one saying doing 10 million in revenue. Is
Sure. Oh,
that
absolutely. Yeah.
volatility and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the lack of systems in place. Like the previous owner, great guy, but like worked in the business, didn't really have a vision for growing it necessarily like in a systematized way. And so, as just an example, when I went in originally and talked to the production team, I was like, yeah, how do you all know when to work? How do you like who sets the schedule? And they said, well, we all talk to each other and agree when we're going to show up. And and like seriously, and like they don't work full time, they work part time, but they were like, we just figure out when everybody's available and we show up. And if we need left, so we come in and make it. Which is like also, which is cool, like kind of from a team point of view, but like there was no system. There was no one to call. They said, well, who do we call if we're sick? And I was like, well, who do you call today if you were sick? And they all kind of look, well, we all call each other. We're just like, okay, well, that's maybe not the best way for this to work.
wow, so there was no management.
It just it wasn't that way in the past because yeah, because they weren't trying to grow it and yes. And so when we said we're going to increase demand, like obviously it doesn't work to only have people show up when they all agree to show up.
Right,
If
right.
you're going to get a bunch more people to buy Lefsa, right? And so we had to be creating something that could be more predictable, and that we could improve how quickly we made Lefsa and how consistently we made it. Um, so sorry, coming back to your question, you were asking me about assumptions. Like I had assumptions just because I had always been in a business that where we had kind of built systems, and I did due diligence. It's not like I had no idea what I was walking into. I knew that these systems didn't exist. I did think creating systems for an environment like that wouldn't be as challenging as it was. Things as simple as like using a time clock instead of a time card where people are writing down their time, like just behavior change can be challenging for people when they've been used to doing it a very different way.
Yeah,
Um, and and that's not and to be clear, the team at Northland is amazing at what they do. It's just change. Change is hard for everybody,
yeah, it's hard.
myself
It's hard.
included. So yes.
Same, especially if you want to change them to be healthy conflict oriented.
Right. Yes, and that too. And healthy conflict oriented.
I
Yes.
imagine. I imagine.
But yeah, yeah.
Um, awesome. And so what's the biggest focus for you now?
Yeah, well, so right now we're working on improving our repeat rate. So, like getting people who bought from us October through December to come back and buy from us again. And so, with that, we're launching some new products. We have got a Kringle cookie at Northland Lefse, which is a Norwegian cookie, and potato wraps, which are more of like an everyday sandwich wrap. So those are specific to Northland. That's how we are now. We're going to market through a combination of private label and expanding our e-commerce with those new products to create more year-round demand. And then at Brilliance, our focus is really using what we've learned at Norse and Lefse to better. We now have some very specific offers for food manufacturers to help them see how they can be better leveraging e-commerce. So I really see the benefit, for other agency owners who might be thinking about like what I wouldn't necessarily say that this path was easy, but what it did was allow us to see more clearly how we create value. I can see that so much more clearly than I could before the acquisition in terms of the benefit to organizations, the benefit to Northern Lefse of Brilliance, how Brilliance adds value. And so then that makes it easier for me to explain to other companies like Northland.
Do you think that so in your agency that services manufacturers,
Yeah.
now that you're a manufacturer, are the biggest differences the words you use to persuade people, or is it like services that you're able to spin up you didn't know existed? Like what's
Well, for one, I can talk about like I used to talk about revenue, now I can talk about margin. which is just, and I mean, I could have talked about margin anyway, but like as a specific example, like, Nors and Lefse improved our margins from 13 to 20%, leveraging what Brilliance does in terms of e-commerce, right? And 20% isn't good enough. We're going to grow it further. But like in the past, it would be really hard for me to talk about that as an agency because most
Yeah,
manufacturers don't want to share their margins with you, right? And
yeah,
and the reality is there are many things that tie into a manufacturer's margins. It won't only be the work that Brilliance is doing for someone, but I can now explain to someone how what we do is related to that process much more clearly because I was the one making the decisions to figure out how to improve our margins.
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
Um, And then what about with your repeat rate? Like I imagine like we have the same deal where there's like Brilliance, you have recurring revenue and reoccurring revenue.
right. Yeah,
For my staffing agency, we do reoccurring revenue where like
right.
you hire from us and then you'll hire from us again in 4 months and etc.
Yep.
And so that's a
Right.
different system than
Right.
someone who's just billing consistently.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I imagine the how much overlap was there between the tactics and strategies you use to increase LTV or increase the repeat rate for Brilliance? Could you just copy paste a lot of that to manufacturing
It's
business?
related, but it's very different, honestly. Yeah, it's very different. I mean, because it's just like at Northern Lefse, we're selling to Norwegian American folks who are buying us because we're a heritage product. At Brilliance, we're selling to business leaders. It's that like they're just different customers. They buy for different reasons. They have different sales cycles. But there are things, I mean, like as an example, like email is an important part of it at Norris and Lefse. We use email at Brilliance. We just use it differently. Um, in both cases, we use customer interviews to better understand like the value and what are the pain points we're solving for. Try and use their words to better speak to new prospects and understand the how we improve. So, yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
But yeah, there's a ton. What I love in both businesses is that there's just so much to learn. And especially right now with, with AI and all the tools that
So
are out
much.
there and exist. Um, yeah, I feel like there's just constantly opportunities to get better.
Yes, I agree. I agree for sure. Um, well, super fun. And so, Lori, where can people find you?
On LinkedIn, you can look me up at Lori McDonald, brillianceweb.com and norzenlefse.com.
Amazing. This has been super fun. Thanks, Lori.
It has been fun. Thank you very much.